You're listening to Heart of Mind, radio for the new millennium. My guest is James S. Gordon, M.D., and he is a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, former researcher at the National Institutes of Mental Health, and chairman of the White House Commission on Complementary Alternative Medicine Policy, and a clinical professor of psychiatry and family medicine at Georgetown Medical School. He has authored or edited 10 other books and has written often for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, as well as numerous professional journals, and has been featured on CBS, 60 Minutes, The Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS Sunday Morning, Nightline, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and NPR. And now he's going to be featured here on WBAI. And he is the author of The Transformation, Discovering Wholeness and Healing After Trauma. And I'm very much looking forward to this because as we just commemorated that September 11th tragedy, I know that people suffered a lot through that experience, even going forward, especially the first responders. But also, we have all kinds of trauma taking place around the world, certainly on every continent and in most countries. People are really struggling. And very often, it's that trauma that keeps us trapped, and we don't know quite what to do about it or how to overcome these issues. So I know that you have a lot of experience with this, and maybe we can start by telling people of some of the ways that you have used your system helping people.
Sure, Kathryn. Happy to do it. What we've done at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, which I founded in 1991 and continue to direct, is to bring programs of self-care and group support not only to individuals who want to learn about it and use it in clinical practice or use it in teaching, but to whole communities that have been traumatized, including New York City firefighters and their families after 9/11. And what we've developed and what I present in the Transformation is a comprehensive program for beginning by balancing out the sort of physiological and psychological disruption that comes in the wake of trauma, and then giving people, using simple techniques like slow, deep breathing with your belly soft and relaxed, to balance out the fight or flight response that comes during trauma, and then, unfortunately, necessary when something terrible is happening and we have to deal with it. But then it continues on and on and on, and becomes not a necessary survival mechanism, but a very destructive and inhibiting and agitating way of being. And also the other response that we often have after a massive trauma, especially, is we freeze, we shut down, we withdraw emotionally, our bodies get stiff and tense. And we begin in our work with people, both in the when we're working with a whole community, and also this is what I teach in the Transformation, we begin by teaching people how to bring their bodies and minds into balance with the slow, deep breathing to quiet the agitation of fight or flight, with moving the body and releasing the tension that's in the body. And we draw on many, many different traditions. I've spent time with traditional healers. I'm obviously trained as a Western psychiatrist, but I've spent time with a variety of different kinds of healers in Asia, in Europe, and with Native Americans, with Sangomas in Southern Africa, and bringing in many of these different tools and techniques that have been used for millennia around the world and combining them with modern scientific approaches to produce a program that can work with and for just about anyone. And that's the idea, is that it's a comprehensive program because no one approach works for every person. And you can't just, or even though talking with another human is enormously helpful, or can be, that doesn't really touch what goes on in the body. And often there are capacities that we have in our imagination that are untapped, that we also can use using guided mental imagery, drawings, written exercises, looking at family trees. We can discover sources of strength as well as get in touch with our vulnerability. So what I've done for the last 30 years or so in working at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine with whole communities or sometimes whole countries that have been traumatized is what I present in the transformation as a clear, comprehensive, easy to follow program for which there's a whole lot of scientific evidence. So that's a kind of overview of what I'm up to in the transformation.
Well, that's wonderful. As it happens, I am a Qigong teacher, so I can relate very much to what you're talking about. But one of the things that I find as a challenge, and I think that many people who are teaching these approaches, is that people don't really believe that they work, and they don't understand how that might compete with some of the more conventional drug therapies or talk therapies. And I'm wondering if you recommend them sometimes in combination with those things, and if you could speak to some of the scientific evidence that you could present as an MD that someone else might not have the same kind of trust in presenting.
That's a great question, and that really is an issue. Now, the scientific evidence, for example, for the effectiveness of meditation, of several different kinds of meditation, in reducing levels of stress, lowering blood pressure, slowing heart rate, enhancing immunity, decreasing anxiety, improving focus, promoting greater compassion for other people, and changing not only the functioning of the brain, but also the structure of the brain, actually creating new brain cells. That evidence is just about as good as for any medication on the planet. There are now many hundreds, perhaps thousands of papers demonstrating very clearly that a variety of different forms of meditation can make this kind of difference in the lives of people with a whole variety of different kinds of conditions. And I present a lot of that evidence in the transformation. There's also very good evidence that moving your body can reduce anxiety and improve mood. So, for example, too often when people go to physicians, not just psychiatrists, but primary care physicians, and they say they're depressed, very quickly the physician is writing out a prescription for an antidepressant, which will indeed raise levels of serotonin or norepinephrine, okay, but it also creates side effects. On the other hand, if you get involved in a program of physical exercise, many different kinds of movement and exercise will also raise serotonin and norepinephrine and dopamine and maybe endorphins as well. So the evidence is there for these approaches. I think that and other approaches that we use, like guided imagery. People have been doing research on the use of our mind to create images that decrease pain and reduce anxiety and enhance immunity. That research has been published, a significant amount over the last 40 years. And it's good research. It's published in peer-reviewed journals. So I think the evidence is there. It's a question of opening our minds. The physician you see, or even some psychotherapists, may not be open to these approaches. I suggest you do. If you are going to be in psychotherapy, or you're interested perhaps in using medication as part of your approach, I would take the approach that I describe in the transformation as fundamental, basic way of coming into balance, mobilizing your imagination, becoming more hopeful, finding more meaning and purpose. And I would combine it, and I suggest this in the appendix to the book. I describe a whole variety of other therapies that can be used with this approach. But I want to emphasize that what I'm presenting is foundational. Anybody can learn it. Really, everyone should learn it. And then you make up your mind which other approach, which other techniques, which other therapies might be useful. And they can all work with one another, work synergistically. That is, each one can improve the outcome from the other. You can put them together. And, we've worked now using this approach. We've trained about, close to 7,000 therapists, educators, community organizers, leaders of women's groups, clergy around the world. And we've worked with hundreds of thousands of people using this approach. And we published a number of papers showing that for those people who have diagnosable post-traumatic stress disorder, that 80% of those people, and post-traumatic stress disorder means anxiety, agitation, flashbacks, nightmares, difficulty connecting with other people that rise to the level of being disabling. 80% of those people no longer qualify for the diagnosis after 11 or 12 sessions of the approach that I described in the transformation. Now, other therapies are also useful. This is, again, I want to repeat, as your question suggests, it's not either or. This is a basic approach that anyone can learn, won't cost you any more than the price of the book, and then you can combine it with other approaches as you see fit, as it makes sense to you, because it's really up to each person to decide what they want, what makes most sense to them.
Excellent. And I'm just reminding everyone we're speaking with Dr. James Gordon, and he is author of The Transformation, Discovering Wholeness and Healing After Trauma. One of the things that I have realized, being a person who grew up in some of the less renowned neighborhoods of New York City, as you said before, we have whole communities who live a life of stress based on poverty, based on violence, based on feeling a lack of opportunity, and also I think based on developing a mindset of hopelessness. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the individual person and how they can empower themselves on that personal level, or empower their family and their children by trying out this work that you're teaching in your book, The Transformation.
I really appreciate the question, and as you say, I'm well aware, having worked in many of those communities here in the U.S. and around the world, I'm well aware of the weight of living in a community that you describe, where there is violence, there is poverty, there's uncertainty about the present, and certainly uncertainty about the future as well. I think it's a really very, very significant problem. And I think in some ways, I want to say this, that it's harder in those kinds of communities here in the United States than it is in some other communities, other places in the world, where there's been even much more violence, much more killing, and much more destruction. And that's because there's such, here in some of our communities, particularly people whose ancestors were affected by slavery or by the genocide, if they're Native Americans, or discrimination, it's just, there's such a history, and that history has taken a toll on people, individual people and families. And also in families where people grow up, where there's not only poverty and violence in the community, but abuse in the family, that also is incredibly difficult to deal with, because it's the people whom you're looking to depend on who are the ones who are hurting you. And that presents a whole other level. And of course, that's not restricted to people who have low incomes. In fact, one of the sort of eye-opening parts of some of the studies on adverse childhood experiences is that this kind of abuse and neglect is very common in middle and upper middle class families in the United States, as well as among people who don't have much money. But coming back to those communities that are affected by violence, I think the first thing that we've seen is that the techniques that we teach give people some sense that even in situations where they can't control too much of what's going on externally, they can control the way their bodies and their minds work. So if you simply sit quietly and breathe deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth with your belly soft and relaxed, and you focus on the breath and on the words soft and belly, and on the feeling of your belly relaxing. And you start to feel the other muscles in your body relaxing. And you do that for 4 or 5 minutes, you begin to feel a change. And the specific change is good. When I do this with people, really pretty much anywhere that I do it, maybe 80% of the people, if I do this for 10 minutes, will notice a benefit. Shoulders are more relaxed, heart rate's slower, they feel more optimistic after doing this when they open their eyes again. But there's also, in addition to the specific benefits, there's also another message, which is at least as important. And that message is you can do something to help yourself to feel better. And as you're suggesting, in communities where there's terrible poverty and violence, what people so often feel is they feel helpless and they feel hopeless. So if you can begin to do something to help yourself, to relax, feel a little clearer, a little more at ease in your body, the message is, I can help myself. I can do something. I may not be able to stop the shooting in the streets. I may not be able to, get right away, get a better paying job or get out of here, but I can do something. And the other thing that the way our minds work is the message is also, and that means I can do other things to help myself. You don't even have to say it. The mind tends to generalize. So you're not only beginning to deal with helplessness, but you're also dealing with hopelessness. Mm-hmm. And then the same with the other techniques. Each of them gives a specific benefit. One of the things that people often feel when they're in poverty, living in poverty, and maybe they've had a hard time in school, is, I don't know how I don't have the ability. I can't fit into this world that's around me. Well, what starts to happen as you begin to quiet your nervous system, as you begin to come in better balance, then you can use some of the imaginative techniques that I teach in the book, and all kinds of other possibilities start opening up that are not easily available to our conscious mind to say, well, I can't do this because of this, and look what happened before, and I don't know if I can, and I don't have the right resume, and I don't have the right education. But what's amazing is as you start using imaginative techniques, and we use drawings, we use guided mental imagery, is all of a sudden other possibilities arise. And they're often quite surprising. So, for example, somebody may feel, we do drawings, and somebody may draw, my biggest problem is I don't have enough money, I have to take care of the kids, my parents are getting old, and so they draw a whole host of problems. And rationally, they can't think of what to do about it. But then in a drawing of a solution to the problem, and sometimes when I make that suggestion, people say, are you kidding? A solution? Mm-hmm. So don't worry about it. Just sit, let it come to you. And what may come is something like they draw themselves walking in the park. Now, that doesn't put more money in their pocket. It doesn't make their parents, doesn't relieve their parents' health problems. But they say, I feel really good when I walk in the park. And I remember when I come back from walking in the park, I feel like a new person. I feel like maybe I can deal with things. So that once again, they're finding something that can help. They're gaining a different perspective. And we've seen many people early on in the book. This is not in the United States, but it strikes me. There was I'm writing about a young girl in Gaza, which is, the strip of Palestinian land on the Mediterranean, totally blockaded and isolated from the rest of the world. And a little girl there who was in one of our mind-body skills groups, and she lost her father in the 2014 war between Hamas and Israel, and lost 2 uncles and an aunt. Her home was destroyed, and her school was destroyed. And when she did, in the first group that she was in, when she first started learning these techniques, before she started learning, the only solution to her problem was to be in a coffin, dead with her father.
Oh, how sad.
9 in total despair. I need to die. The Israelis should kill me. I'll be with my father. That's the only I can be. After using same program that's there in the transformation, 3 weeks later, after 9 sessions, she did another set of drawings, and the equivalent drawing of where she wanted to be, she drew herself in a white coat with a stethoscope around her neck and somebody lying on an examining table in front of her, and she was listening to their heart. I said, "What's happening?" She said, "I am a heart doctor. I'm going to be a heart doctor." And there were 5 people standing next to this examining table. I said, who are these people? She said, "They're my other patients. They're waiting for me." So this girl went from being in utter despair and began to use these techniques, began to feel more relaxed, more in her body, to start using her imagination, to think about ways to address current problems in her life. We had her doing fast, deep breathing and moving her body around and learning how to walk in a mindful, relaxed way, learning a little bit about how to eat food in a relaxed way. She did a genogram, a diagram of her family tree, and looked to sources of strength in the family that was still left to her, as well as in her ancestors. And on her own, without anyone saying, "No, you shouldn't think that way about dying," or "You should do this," or nobody was telling her anything, really. We were just giving her an opportunity to discover what was going on inside herself and to deal with her pain, to deal with her loss. And what happened is, by the 9th group, this girl with a broken heart could see herself healing the hearts of other people in Gaza. She could see her way to a future. And it's sort of amazing. I mean, that's why I call the book The Transformation. We see this again and again and again. Now, it's not always this fast. It's not always this easy. People who've had, long-term trauma, long-term poverty, who've lived amidst violence, not just for a couple of years, but for their whole life, may take a longer period of time, but it's possible. It's definitely possible. I'm working with people who've been in prison for years, who've been able, who were very despairing at first, and they've begun to sort of come out of it. This is the capacity that we humans have. And then, of course, we have to deal with the environment. The other thing that you mentioned that's really important and that I encourage in the transformation is reaching out to other people. One of the terrible things in our communities is that they're no longer as connected. We're no longer as connected and as coherent as communities. Every socioeconomic class I know, just about every ethnicity that I know of, we don't feel the same kinds of connections we may have had 30 or 50 or 100 years ago. And we really need to rebuild those. That's part of the healing process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But it does seem that, like this young woman, I would say, in Gaza, she began to envision herself engaging and doing something to improve and to help her community. If this work can help people to reach that place where they can be creative about their contribution, then maybe our communities will get better.
That's my hope. And that's what, we've seen this in many, many, many communities. This is a part of the potential healing process from trauma. Psychologists who are studying it call it post-traumatic growth. And it comes, if you can use the techniques, if you can use this program that I sort of present in the transformation, it comes on its own. If we're going to fulfill ourselves as human beings, part of that fulfillment is connecting with and supporting and being friendly or even loving toward other human beings, making a positive contribution. That's part of our natural evolution. And so you're absolutely right. If you can use this program, we've seen it happen again and again and again and again. I was just listening to, we have a big program on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, which is the second poorest county in the United States. And we began the program, we'd done some volunteer work there before, but we began an intensive program after an epidemic of youth suicide. 22 kids had killed themselves in 1 year. And we began to work, and we began to teach our method. Wherever we go, we're training local people. So we trained some clinicians, lots of teachers, tribal elders, traditional healers, also youth or peer counselors, coaches, first responders. And in the 3 years since we started working intensively and combining our work, and this is an important piece too, with traditional Lakota healing, there's only been 2 youth suicides. So in 3 years as opposed to 22 in 1 year. So still 2 is too many.
But still, that's a big improvement.
The whole community
is
coming together. And that's a beautiful outcome. And people are, people who really were, people who lived in different parts of Pine Ridge, which is very spread out, who never talked to each other before. Now they're talking to each other and they're working together. So that can happen as people learn how to help and heal themselves. The natural impulse is to want to reach out to other people and to build community.
I would love to see this being expressed in our school systems here in New York City, aside, rather than this kind of system that they have of testing children and not really teaching them any life skills. I think this would make a big difference in their ability to grow and engage and compete in the world as they get older. It seems like you're teaching some basic human life skill sets that we all need, and that's pretty amazing in my book. So it seems that you have a specific program, and before we go too far into this conversation, I do want to hear about that.
I loved what you said about bringing this program to New York City schools. I grew up in New York City. I would very much welcome bringing it to the schools there. We're working now in the Broward County school system in Florida. That's the county in which Parkland is, where there were the shootings at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School a couple of years ago on February 14th, and 17 people were killed. And I couldn't agree with you more. This is basic. This should be part of the education of every child. And fortunately, the superintendent there, Robert Runcie, he gets it. And maybe he can speak with the superintendent. I'm sure he'd be happy to speak with the New York superintendent of schools. I mean, Broward it's not as big as New York, but it's got 270,000 kids, so it's not a small school system. And we're beginning by training teachers, training parents, we're training coaches, we're training first responders, and we're training youth peer counselors. And began working primarily in the area around Parkland, but now we're expanding throughout the county to all the different schools and all the different communities. And it's a process that takes time, but we've already trained about 300 people who are beginning to make this work available, whether they're social workers or school counselors or teachers or parents. They're making this approach that's in the transformation available to kids in the schools, to teachers and staff, and to community members. So this is basic information that should be part of our growing up, part of what we learn. I think, the interesting thing about teaching these techniques, like the soft belly breathing that I mentioned earlier, are like doing the drawings that give people hope that change is possible, or getting up and moving your body. Sometimes we use Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga, which are moving, slow, beautiful, moving meditations. We also use shaking and dancing, moving the body, just getting rid of tension. The techniques that we use are all in the transformation, and then there's much more in the transformation as well. So there may be 20 different techniques that we teach, and we teach them, and I present them in a sequence. So they build up from creating some kind of harmony in the body and mind and a sense of control, then using the body to move and shake and get rid of excess tension and get rid of fixed ideas that run around in our minds like rats in a maze that we need to just get out of our minds. And then teaching self-expression in drawings, in words, in movement, whole series of techniques. We teach people how to spend time in nature, how to allow ourselves to be more grateful, and how to bring forgiveness into our lives. First of all, forgiveness for ourselves, but also forgiveness for people who've hurt us, and asking forgiveness of others. So it's a comprehensive program. And what we're finding is that people who use this program are having very significant changes in their lives. And the other thing about it is it's a comprehensive program with many parts, is that if you don't like one part of it, there are many other approaches that are also available. I think one of the mistakes that's often made is people are saying, well, you have to do this or you have to do that. And if this or that doesn't appeal to you, you say, well, no, I don't know what to do now. Maybe there's nothing I can do. But what I've found doing this work now, really for 50 years, and working intensively with traumatized individuals and populations for almost 30 years, is that no single technique works for everybody. And so it's important to create a real partnership, which I do my best to do in the transformation, so that you're deciding each step of the way, well, should I use this? And how is it working? And let me check in with myself and see what difference it's making. So this is all an opportunity for learning and growth and growing in discernment, using your mind, trusting and learning to trust your own intuition about what you should do and should not do, and not being bullied by anybody. I mean, it's really, sometimes people will say, this is the way you have to do it. Well, that's not true. There are so many ways that we can help and heal ourselves. And what I'm doing in the transformation is offering people a whole variety of different ways, and then encouraging them to test each one out and see what it's like for them.
Excellent. And we're talking about the book by Dr. James Gordon, The Transformation, Discovering Wholeness and Healing After Trauma. I also want to hear about your program coming up at the New York Open Center. Dr. Mehmet Oz in conversation with Dr. James Gordon on discovering wholeness and healing after trauma. And this is going to be an evening conversation and book signing Thursday, October 3rd, starting at 7 p.m. And people will actually get the book as a result of getting their tickets to the program. So that's pretty amazing. So if you could tell us about this event and somehow weave that into what the program is that is being offered in The Transformation, your book, The Transformation.
Yeah, the conversation will be with Mehmet Oz, and Mehmet and I have known each other for some years, and he's very interested, has always been interested in the work that we're doing, and now has begun to work with us to see if he can bring the work to Turkey, to the country where his family comes from. And this is the program at the Open Center is to bring the understanding and the insights and the program of the transformation to people in New York City. And Mehmet is a wonderful interviewer, and we have a good time. And hopefully we will tell people things that will be interesting and informative. And the evening will be very participatory, because Mehmet and I will be talking, and then we'll be wanting to hear from people who come in the audience and just have a dialogue to include people. And maybe I'll teach one or two of the techniques there as well, depending on the time and depending on what's happening.
And truth be told, if you're living in this world right now, we're all somewhat traumatized just by the way our politics turn and with the conflict in the world. And it's very unsettling to have to listen to the news and engage and try to understand how we're going to turn this world around so that it functions in a better way. But I think you have part of the answer, because just like the Parkland students who got up and began to have their voices heard despite their youth, they had that courage. And your book is a way for people to heal themselves from whatever their experience might be and build that courage and the actual resources inside, their personal, emotional, spiritual, mental resources to be able to engage in the world in a healthy way. So I agree. I think this is a book that needs to be in all of our hands. The Transformation, Discovering Wholeness and Healing After Trauma. And Dr. James Gordon will be in a conversation with Mehmet Oz on discovering wholeness and healing after trauma. And Dr. James Gordon will be in a conversation with Mehmet Oz on discovering wholeness and healing after trauma. It's being offered by the Open Center, and you can find more at opencenter.org. And actually, there's a pre-event meet and greet with Dr. Gordon that starts before the event, and the event itself, an evening conversation and book signing, all that on Thursday, October 3rd. And you will receive your copy of your book as a result of registering for this particular event. So that is a fun way to get it because you'll have the book, you can get it signed, and then you can be inspired, then go home and get started on transforming your own life. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to engage themselves in this work. So, Dr. Gordon, if people want to interact with you and get some kind of formal training or maybe connect with whatever websites or videos you might have, and actually I was wondering when you were doing the meditation if you have any meditation CDs because your voice is quite soothing.
Thank you. The place to go is CMBM, Charlie Mary, Betty Mary, CMBM.org. That's the Center for Mind Body Medicine. Within the next week, there'll be a number of videos up with many of these tools and techniques, including the soft belly breathing, shaking and dancing, guided imagery, the work with drawings. Those are all available and free, and you're welcome to download them. And our work is my work and the Center for Mind Body Medicine's work is to make these tools and techniques, this process of transformation, available to everyone who wants and needs it. And we also offer trainings. We work with whole communities like the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation or Broward County schools, or Houston after Hurricane Harvey, or Sonoma County after the wildfires. We're working in Puerto Rico after the hurricanes there. And we also have open trainings so that anybody who wants to learn and use our work and share it with others. Once a year, we have an open training. I think this year's training, it's an open training and then anyone can come. On the other hand, it's filled up already. It's at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. We'll be having another open training next summer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We also have groups. If you look on our website, you'll see people whom we've certified in using this approach that's in the transformation, people who lead mind-body skills groups. So you may be able to find someone who lives near you who's leading a group. We also have online groups. So you can register for one of the online groups. And we have a sliding scale for everything that we do. So if you're well-to-do, we will charge you the appropriate price. And if you don't have much money, we won't charge you much money at all. So we want people to be able to use what we have to offer. And then the other thing is, if there's anybody listening from the New York public school system, or people who are interested in bringing our whole approach to your community, please get in touch. Just write to cmbm.org and will get to me eventually, or J. Gordon, Gordon, at cmbm.org. If you're in a position to make something happen, that's the way a number of our programs have started. People have said, we want you to come here. We're going through this kind of situation. I'm the principal of a school, or I'm the head of a union, or I'm a head of a department in a hospital. Let's talk about bringing your program to us. And that's how we've begun many programs. So we're always interested in talking with people about that.
listening to Heart of Mind Radio for the New Millennium. I'm Kathryn Davis, and our guest today has been Dr. James Gordon, and he has been talking to us about discovering wholeness and healing after trauma. He's the author of the book, The Transformation, and he will be speaking at an event at the Open Center with Dr. Mehmet Oz in conversation with Dr. James Gordon. And that's going to be an evening conversation and book signing Thursday, October 3rd at 7 p.m. There is a pre-event as well, and you can find out more by going to the website opencenter.org, and the Open Center is located 22 East 30th Street in New York, 10016. The event is actually going to take place at the premises of the Open Center. So again, you can go to registration at opencenter.org, or you can call 212-219-2527, 212-219-2527. And this has been, in a way, part 2 of our program on meditation and mindfulness. And for those of you who would like to go deeper into this conversation, of course, you can connect with Dr. Gordon. But we also are going deeper into it between you and I here over these airwaves. And I have some questions that I would like for you to consider. Those of you who have a mind to, please send an email to heartofmindradio@gmail.com, and you can receive this questionnaire. And it represents my intake form when I'm working with people, but it also helps us to begin to look at where we are on the inside. So this is a questionnaire that is meant to be done in the moment, because we change from moment to moment, and we have different influences throughout our day, week, and month. And also we're living within a soup of energies that are going to have an impact on how we feel, depending on what's happening in the realm of the stars and how we read our horoscope and signs. There's also an impact on the energy in our social structure, if we are engaging with people who are generally positive, or if we are engaging with people who are generally hostile. Those environments are going to have an impact on how we are doing. And sometimes we have to sort through all of these influences and allow ourselves to get in touch with what's happening at the deepest level for our own being. And part of that discriminating of looking at what is coming from the inside and what is happening on the outside really helps us to drill down into those facets of our being that are calling to us for our attention, because most often that's exactly what it means, that our attention is being drawn to a particular place that requires either our attention or assistance, or perhaps some kind of transformation, or it may be that we want to shift our vantage point and look at something from a new perspective. Very often we can mentally, emotionally get into a rut, and we are repeating the words, repeating the sentences, repeating the sentiments that ultimately can work to bring our spirit down. And we want to catch that and transform it at as opportune a time as possible. So for that reason, I'm going to share with you some of these questions, and you can ask them of yourself, or you can take it further and reach out for a deeper dialogue on some of the answers you might have for these questions. And so I offer a few introductory questions in order to sort of bring up within yourself a sense of what's going on, because sometimes we feel something, it's impacting us, and we don't really know the source of it or even what it is. And so some questions you might ask yourself: what is your emotional state at this moment? What is your physical state at this moment? What is your mental state at this moment? What is the state of your heart at this moment? So you could even do this in journaling. Write down these questions, just beginning with, my emotional state at this moment is, my physical state at this moment is, my mental state at this moment is, the state of my heart at this moment is. And that will give you a starting point for your daily journal so that you can really begin to discern how you're feeling, how you're moving forward, and you'll be able to look from day to day how those issues are changing for you. And it can lead you into a deeper understanding of some of the things that are taking place within you. And then we have another section which is titled, How Would You Characterize Your General State at This Moment? And this is really just a check-off. And these statements vary, so they more than one may be true for you. And in this way, you can begin to see some of the complexity of what's going on within yourself and what might be impacting your life. And that way you can go a little bit more broad in the self-analysis on what's happening with you. And so this would just be a check-off, yes or no, or you would maybe just check the ones that apply. I am excellent, but want to improve or have a breakthrough. I feel good for the most part, but have some little issues that I am dealing with. I am emotionally okay, but physically exhausted and have some aches and pains. Doing okay physically, but feeling emotionally dull or depressed. My thoughts are very repetitive and affects how I feel. My mind is in a fog and I cannot stay focused. My heart is broken and I am sad or lonely. My life is well ordered and everything is going okay, but I need to go to the next level. My life is a disorganized mess and I feel trapped and unable to move forward. I am anxious and fearful much of the time. I am not controlled by fear and sometimes take risks. I feel sabotaged either by myself or others. I am completely stressed out. So those are just a series of questions where we can have a starting point. Some of them are more positive seeming, some of them are more negative seeming, but they're really all neutral because it really becomes an entry point for questioning and self-discovery. We're going to be going deeper into this in our next program, talking about the implications of each of these questions and what we might do to resolve some of these feelings that we are holding within our body, within our being. For those of you who want the written questions, and these are questioning for self-inquiry, just send an email, and I'll be happy to send this out to you. Write to heartofmindradio@gmail.com. Stay tuned for more great programming. Take care, and we'll be back again next week.
any load too big to carry. Yeah, come to the river where the healing waters flow. There will be mountains to climb.